Welcome to the latest episode of the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. My name is Hunter Baumgardt, your host. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. Also, be sure to like the Facebook page, Hunter Baumgardt Sports. Remember, you can watch or listen to the podcast. You can watch on YouTube, listen on SoundCloud, whatever works best for you. Today, we have an interview for you, and a fun one. Kevin Holden from CBS 58 in Milwaukee. He is a sports anchor for them, and he is joining me on the podcast today, and we're going to talk about a myriad of things. Anchoring sports from his house, basically being on TV from his house. How has that been? And also some of this different sports stuff, baseball, basketball, etc. When's it going to come back? We'll see what he has to say. All that coming up right now with Kevin Holden. Kevin Holden, sports anchor for CBS 58 in Milwaukee, joining us on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. You can follow Kevin on Twitter at 321QKevin. That's 321CUE Kevin. And Kevin, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your at-home work from home schedule to join me today.
Yeah, glad to do it, Hunter. It's an extraordinary time in sports right now, and glad to share some of the details of it because it's never been more fascinating, I think, to see how television, radio, podcasts, any of this stuff is being made during a pandemic.
Yes, exactly. I completely agree. And extraordinary is a great word for it. How has this pandemic been for you? Kind of give us a glimpse of as to what it's like being a TV sports anchor at home and doing everything from home.
It was scary at the beginning.
Yeah, I bet.
It was really nerve-wracking, to be honest. When it was mid-March when we were all prepared for our normal lives. We were in the week of Selection Sunday. We were talking about conference basketball tournaments, and then the word came down that first of all none of those things was going to happen, and then secondly we would eventually all be sent home to sort of reduce the body count inside the station, so you would have fewer people, less transmission of the virus, that sort of thing. We were scared to death because our lives have been set around mostly games. I mean, you do have feature stories, but the games aspect of what we do is the main aspect of what we do. You prepare for Brewers game day, Packers game day, Bucks game day. So when they sent us home, we had these feature stories ready because you always have a handful that are just sort of in the can ready to go or being prepared. So we got all of those together, and there are three of us in the sports department. We gathered and we said, okay, we can last for 9 days. That's what we have. We have a feature story a day for 9 days. So if this virus lasts any longer than 9 days, we may have to throw a white flag. So we got home and started in figuring out how this was all done. And so two things happened. First of all, no one has changed the amount of time we get in the show. No one has changed the amount of staff we get. We have the same staff at the same time. And the other thing is we have made this work every single day, and it's been so unbelievably cool to see. How we've done it is just like you and I are doing this right now. Zoom meetings, calls, and interviews with whether it's professional athletes, people whose stories stand out during the pandemic, that sort of thing. We have found a way to make a story fit in every single day since then, and we're talking more than 2 months now. So that's the first thing that's really cool. The other half is you have to learn new technology. I am doing this without a camera. I'll show this to you. Hopefully this won't blow out anything here. This is my light.
Okay.
And my iPhone goes into this right here.
Yes.
And literally from that, it is a lavalier microphone. That's this thing right here. Plug this in, lavalier microphone into the phone. I record what I'm doing in a phone and then send it to myself and edit it on a laptop editor. This is absolutely crazy. Even 5 years ago, I couldn't have considered that we could do it, but we get it done every day. So
you're literally anchoring, from home using your phone.
Yeah, it's.
Right.
I mean, so here, this is the magic phone. There's all kinds of sportscasts in here, bloopers that you probably don't want to see. But anyway, there's a little adapter, right, that just goes from this phone into the plug, and the plug goes in the microphone, and I just wear it, and I dress like the stereotypical sports anchor, where it's suit, top, tie, basketball shorts, right?
Yes.
And no one ever sees that part of it, thankfully. But it looks normal. I sit exactly where I'm sitting right now. This is my set, and I'm on my dining room table. That's where I'm sitting right now.
Did you have to go through like a decision process of where you would do it in the house? Because it's different, right? Because radio, you can set up wherever. You close yourself off in a room. It doesn't matter. The background doesn't matter anything. You could do it outside if you wanted to. For TV, it's all you're being seen obviously every day. So it's all about the background, you making it look nice. Was that like, did you have to kind of try different rooms to see what would work, or were you like, this is where I'm going to go?
Well, there's a decision-making process for sure, and I got to
Okay.
give a lot of credit to my wife because honestly, if it's any matter of taste or artistic merit or style, that's almost always her doing. That's her department, and so we sat down the first day, and she said, "This corner, this is it. We have kind of a loft style place here where the living room and the kitchen and the dining room are all one large room."
Okay.
And she said we should go into this corner mostly because it's the least amount of light. There are a lot of windows here, and there's this one right here. But by the time we tape a show, this is dark. But the idea was this was a corner. This is the china cabinet that's got all the stuff on top of it here.
Mhm.
And she said we can decorate the top of the china cabinet. We'll put this a ballpark map is what it is in the U.S. Up there. And so the first one literally was her standing there with a phone taping me. We didn't have a microphone. We didn't have a light. She just did we recorded a video on the phone. And then she said, all right, we got to go buy what they call an iRig, and that's the light and the mic and stuff. So yeah, this was it was a decision-making process. It was a little tense, it's hard
I
to
bet.
used to making television in a studio with lights and cameras and
Yeah.
a floor director and a teleprompter. I can't tell you how much I miss a teleprompter. But we've learned, we've adapted, and we're still making it.
So when you talk about a teleprompter, obviously that helps a lot when you're in the studio and reading off that. Are you basically writing it, printing it, putting a piece of paper in front of you and then doing it? Or are you doing more off the cuff, are you finding?
Well, so at first I tried to do the whole show just sort of off the cuff, and it's funny because I do some work in radio on the side,
Yeah.
and so I'm used to filling time. I'm used to being able to drag out, but there was something about doing it without a script that was making it really difficult. I was going way too long. It was like twice as much as I should be. So I found out I had to type out the scripts to keep myself in line. Television's a very 10 seconds for this, 15 for this, 20 for this.
Mhm.
So you have to be, you can't go too far over in the course of a show. So I type it up, but here's the difference, because there's no way really for me to, I guess you could put a piece of paper on that light, but I just put it on a screen, like a Microsoft Word document, and have it on my screen. And I try not to look at it. I try to sort of get the gist of 2 or 3 sentences where I'll be on camera, and then I try to say it. And the good news is everything's taped. So
Yeah.
if I mess up, I just do it again. But anytime that I'm not on camera, I can just read. But I just try to not memorize, but get the gist of those 2 or 3 sentences and then read them on camera.
Okay, that makes sense. Kevin Holden, he's a sports anchor for CBS 58 in Milwaukee, joining us on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. So I was curious as well, you mentioned doing interviews. Are you finding that it's been tougher or easier to book interviews during this time? Because obviously without sports going on, there isn't a ton to talk about specifically, except for obviously stories of players. But then, obviously players have a lot more time because they're not playing sports. So what's that been like booking interviews or trying to find people to interview?
Now you got your finger very much on the pulse of what it was like, which is we were scared to death at first because normally you don't get a lot of athletes, big names, or any sort of pro athletes on something away from their office, and so we were worried that we would just have no shot for interviews. So we just blanketed everybody that we could find in any sort of social media platform. And it turns out that, as you say, they've got time too. They don't have anything going on. So what we found was, especially early, it was much easier than we thought to be able to get, I'm trying to think of some examples. Marquez Valdez-Scantling talked with Scott Grodsky, who's one of our reporters. Josh Lindblom talked with Christina Tuso, who's one of our reporters. So you have, a lot of those types of interviews that I think otherwise wouldn't happen. But it's just like our conversation. The fascinating thing about it is no matter where you are in an interview with someone, in other words, Chris Orr just got drafted. So the interview would normally be, Chris, this is exciting. You're starting your NFL career. What do you think about the fit for the team, that sort of thing? The interview turns into 60%. Dude, how are you staying in shape? How are you preparing because you can't do anything you normally do. So I think that's the thing that saved us, is this sort of communal fascination with how the virus has changed our lives and how adaptive people have done great things during this virus. And athletes have to be that way. If you're going to be an elite athlete, you have to adapt. And this is just another case of them adapting.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I remember you saying when you were on Bill Michaels' show, very, very beginning of this, and it was like even a couple days before they shut things down, and you were talking about how journalists in this time can be, you know, have a big impact because you're getting the word out to people, and you thought, you know, maybe as a sports anchor you might have to do even a little more news, or obviously incorporate that into your sports stories. How have you done more news? Have you kind of been trying to mix the two, or try to give people maybe a little distraction from the news when you do your sports stories? How's that balance been like?
Yeah, I've been surprised. I did think that we would end up, at least one of us, there are three in the department, like I said, that one of us would end up kind of crossing over and doing news stories. And we've kept busy enough that it hasn't happened. Our news department hasn't asked us to do that. We'll put, every once in a while, you'll put something in an interview, you know, you'll phrase your questions differently. The other thing is you'll look for different stories in that it's not every day that you're saying, here's a Packers player. You know, sometimes it's, we've got a story coming up soon where there's a kid who went to Rufus King High School in Milwaukee who is a golf caddy and has won a college scholarship as a caddy. And basically that garnered him a college scholarship. An incredibly cool thing. And that's an interview that probably gets buried or doesn't run a lot of times this time of year with Packers and Brewers and everything. But he's going to get a full story. His name is Ray. Very, very cool young man. And he's going to get a story, but he's also, again, the same thing. Ray, how do you keep your skills up right now? You know, I mean, the golf courses have started to open again, but Ray's not out there. I mean, our plan was to do that interview on a golf course. We had to do it this way, this virtual meeting thing. So now if you look in the market, you'll see some other folks, our colleagues at the NBC station, WTMJ, have crossed over and done a lot of news stories, restaurants that are still open and that sort of thing. And they've done tremendous work. I don't want you to tune away from 58, but just know that they've done tremendous work.
Right.
They've been fantastic. But yeah, so there's a mix. There are some who've done news. We have not so far.
Sure. No, that makes sense. He's Kevin Holden, sports anchor at CBS 58 in Milwaukee. You can follow him on Twitter at 321QKevin. That's CUE Kevin. Now, I do want to get a little more into your career, kind of your more regular career when there's not a pandemic going on. And that's a really interesting thing you do, the Spanish play-by-play for the Brewers and Packers. And I'm really interested in this. So tell us a little bit about how you got started in that. And obviously, you have to be fluent in Spanish to do that. So how long did it take you to master the language, and how did that work?
It's a fascinating story because I am not of a Hispanic background. Spanish wasn't spoken at home. So for me, it was all about schooling. I went to school for broadcast journalism and basically wanted to stay around a little while longer in college. So I turned a Spanish minor into a Spanish major, thinking that I would never use it, that I was like, hey, what a cool excuse to be in college another year. And years later, you know, I come here to this station, CBS 58, and they tell me in the interview, we've got Telemundo, Wisconsin in the same building. Basically, those two are operated both by our parent company, Weigel Broadcasting. So they said, hey, maybe we can use you. And I'm like, yeah, sure. You'll want me on your Spanish station, sure. So, you know, it's fine. I nod and smile, and they hire me. And a few months later, I do just like a 1-minute update that I just stumbled through. Man, was it bad. And they came to me and they said, you know, we do Brewers games on Telemundo. I'm like, sorry, what?
Right.
You do what on the station? They said, yeah, Sunday home Brewers games. Are you interested? And I said, I can't describe to you the level of interested that I am. I don't have a word to describe it. It's that big, but I'm going to have to learn. So I spent that whole off season leading into my first Brewers year with a box of flashcards. And every day it was, what's a ground ball? What's a fly ball? What's a double? What's a single? And it was months of it. And you know, I had the background in the language from school. They don't teach you baseball terms in school. So I tried to merge those together. I was still absolutely terrible off the top, just like, you know, we were joking that it was like the first year was like See baseball, So, and I was a color commentator, thank goodness. So our play-by-play guy,
Okay.
Hector Molina, could carry the broadcast for me, and I didn't have to do much at first. But I've grown into it. I took over the play-by-play role in 2014, and it's I can't lie. It's the coolest thing I've ever done in broadcasting. It's an incredible challenge. It's an incredible payoff, and I've always been a baseball fan. So yeah, it literally checks every box for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I thought that'd be interesting just to hear, because obviously doing play-by-play in English can be tough enough itself, and doing it in a completely another language, I am just super impressed by that. So you talked about it was one of the coolest experiences. I know you've had probably some very cool experiences covering different events for CBS 58 in general for sporting events in Wisconsin. Is there an event or moment that you cut while covering a sporting event, a bigger one for, say, Wisconsin sports, you kind of looked around and said, holy cow, I'm covering this event? Is there like one or two events that you can think of off the top of your head that just kind of come out at you?
Yeah, there's been plenty in the time I've been here since 2009. So you're talking about this combination where the Packers have won a Super Bowl and the Brewers have been in the NLCS twice, and you've had a championship game involving the Badgers in basketball. I mean, it's just the number of successful teams and successful stories in that 10, almost 11-year span has been crazy. I'd say the one that stands out for me is probably the 2011 Division Series for the Brewers. Now, we all experienced the memory as Carlos Gomez and Niger Morgan and the deciding fifth game and that sort of thing. So I think the reason that stands out to me is, if you remember the way that game went, it's the deciding game of the Division Series, and John Axford blows a save for the first time all year. It had not happened all year. And there's an interview room at Miller Park for the media. It's like an auditorium. And you sit in there, and that's where it's like a staging area. You get ready to go into the locker room, or people come in there sometimes for interviews. So but it's across from the clubhouse. That's the important piece of information. So we're sitting in the auditorium, and as this game looks like it's going to be a Brewers win, you see all of this stuff go by, the champagne and the carts, and they're preparing the locker room. They have to tarp off everything. I mean, they have this thing in full preparation. So then John Axford blows the save, and rapidly in the other direction comes all of the champagne, like get it out of here,
Wow.
So then it's tied. Then it goes to extras, and then we sit, right? And then comes the moment. So when the moment happens again, as fast as they can, everything is back in the clubhouse for the celebration. And I'm like, this kind of what I mean, not only is it a great moment, it's kind of what I signed up for. One of the coolest thing to me about journalism in this way, sports journalism, and news journalism too, is you get a front row seat to life. And that's what that was. I got to experience that moment, which is iconic and it's memorable, but not just because of the moment, but because you're seeing it from the front row. Essentially, you're seeing it from up close. So I can tell you several of those, but that was probably the first one. And the first time that I'm like, all right, this Milwaukee thing's going to be pretty cool.
Yes, exactly. Especially 2 years into your tenure in Milwaukee. That's an awesome event. And of course, as Brewers fans, we all remember that as well. I do want to get into a couple sports topics here before we get off the podcast here. So let's talk about baseball first, since we're on the baseball subject. Baseball's got some crazy stuff going on. These owners and these players are in quite a bind trying to come up with an economic agreement. What do you think ultimately happens here? Do you think we see baseball in 2020, or do you think this gap is just too far?
If you asked me that question every day this week, I probably would give you a different percentage.
Me too.
It's because every day brings a new development. So at the time, I hope you don't mind that I'm time stamping this.
No, for sure. Go ahead.
Doing this interview, the owners have put forth a proposal where top tier players receive less pay. They get a higher pay cut. And the players are trying to respond with their own proposal that basically throws the owner's proposal completely out. Like, we're doing our own thing here. So that tells you how far apart the sides really are. And it's a difficult thing because the optics are extremely bad. The NHL has a plan. The NBA reportedly has a plan. It looks like it's pretty close to happening, and baseball is stuck, and it's because of this animosity that's been building up for years between owners and players. I think eventually that they'll get it done. I still feel like it's better than 50-50 we have a season, but they have to sort this out, and I think they have to put some egos aside.
Yeah.
Say, look, the important thing is we got to play in 2020. And we can deal with our CBA and our other, problems that we're having with money and unions and that kind of thing when the CBA, which is after 2021. I think they're going to have to separate the animosity from the desire to play. And when that happens, then I think we have a season.
Yeah, I completely agree there. And also the NBA is an interesting spot. Obviously, they're leaning towards Orlando. And at the moment of this interview, they haven't decided exactly yet. But there's been a bunch of plans thrown around. Obviously, as you covering the Bucks, being Bucks fans, we're interested to see how this is all going to play out, what if they're going to play some regular season or jump to the postseason, who they're going to play, if they go 1 through 16, whatever they do. So what would you do? Say, would you finish the regular season? Would you play 5 games of the regular season and then jump to the postseason, or just do the postseason, do one of these group stage things that they've got going on? What would you like to see the NBA do?
I think, to me, the biggest thing, because you're talking about the season not resuming until late July and
Right.
maybe even early August, that's pretty late. And if you're the NBA, you run the risk of running that season into other seasons. One of the things that makes the NBA so good in May and June is that unless you are a diehard baseball fan, you're paying attention, because there's really not anything else competing against those NBA playoffs. With that said, I don't know if I would change a whole lot of the structure. I think the regular season would end for me, and I would take the top 8 from each conference, and I'd send them to Orlando, and we'd start the playoffs, and we'd do it rapidly, because I would want, one, I want the fan interest back immediately, and 2, I don't want it to drag out unnecessarily long. I know there's a proposal out there for 20 teams, which I call the Zion Williamson plan, because guess who's on one of the 10 seeds? But I don't want to make it too complicated. 8 in each conference. Let's decide a title. It's already weird enough that it's got to happen in one location. So I don't want to change anything else about the structure except the location.
Yes, exactly. And last question for you. Speaking of these different plans, and we talked a little bit about this off the camera here, but how are you guys as a station thinking about, or even if you are thinking about yet, or being able to plan at all, how maybe you'll be able to cover games? What are people telling you? Because obviously, if there are no fans at baseball, NBA, even NFL, it's going to be all about the media bringing the fans the content. So what's been the going word around the station about that?
Well, I wish I could tell you that we had some sort of advance notice on how this would work, but we haven't heard a word from anybody, from any league at all. And I think the biggest reason is, as you know, getting these plans together, this is a very large scale operation, trying to figure out how to test players and personnel and get games in and try to guard against the idea of having to stop a season. So they've had a lot that they've had to deal with. I think we're in there in the sense that they're thinking about how we will be allowed to cover games, if we will be allowed to cover games. So I just think maybe they haven't gotten to us yet, and they don't want to say anything till they know. If I'm using my crystal ball, here's what I think the next 6 months is going to look like.
Okay.
Have you heard the term pool feed? It's used for various things, court cases, that sort of thing, where one station sends one camera into an event and the other stations are there. They're just not inside the event. They're outside, and basically one station records what happens, and then they come out and they distribute the video to the other stations. That's what's called a pool feed. I think pool feeds are about to be, for the foreseeable future, a thing that's going to happen, because everything is about lowering the physical number of bodies that are in an event, which is why fans can't go to events right now. So if you can get it down to 1 or 2, say a reporter and a photographer, and that person can go into the locker room or the clubhouse after a game, they can ask all the pertinent questions, and then they can come out with that video and distribute it to the other stations. Unfortunately, it means everyone has the same content when it comes to that, but at least we all have content, and that's the most important thing. So that's my vision for it. Is I think I'm going to be spending a lot of time waiting outside arenas and outside locker rooms waiting for pool feeds.
Yes, and yeah, in the interim that may stink a little bit, but obviously with the safety, it's just as long as if you're there, that's at least something, right? It's good, something that's better than nothing, and we'll just kind of see how this all goes. But Kevin, I really appreciate the time this afternoon, taking some time out of your schedule to jump on the podcast, and yeah, it's really fun to talk to you.
Thank you, Hunter. Appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun, and again, just a time unlike any other. Most of the time, we're talking about defensive backfields and
Yes.
pitching staffs. It's a stretch of your ability to handle things, your skills, and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
So I mean, just like we're doing, you're dealing with it and handling it well, and appreciate you letting me chat with you for a little while.
Yeah, no problem. Hopefully we can have you on again to talk about defensive backfields and things like that. I'm really hoping we can do that again sometime soon. So thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
No problem.
That's Kevin Holden of CBS 58 in Milwaukee. He is a sports anchor for them. You can follow him on Twitter at 321QKevin. That's 321CUE Kevin. Well, thanks again to Kevin for joining me on the podcast this week. Super interesting conversation, super fun conversation. Talked about some, from anchoring in his house to the different sports things going on. Hopefully we get sports soon, as we discussed. Well, thanks again for watching. Remember, you can watch or listen to the podcast, whatever is easier for you. Watch on YouTube, listen on SoundCloud. Simply search Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. Remember to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. I'll give you all the updates on the podcast there. And feel free to like the Facebook page as well, Hunter Baumgardt Sports. Thanks again for watching or listening, and we'll talk to you soon. And as always, stay positive.